Hello, MotoAmerica fans. It's time for another episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you may even learn something from this unlikely pair and their special guest. The mic is yours, Paul and Sean.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Carruthers, the communications manager for MotoAmerica. I've got with my partner here, Sean Bice, and this is Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. It's our weekly MotoAmerica podcast. And this, Sean, this is the farthest one we've ever done, right? So, like, we're really got to count on like the phone gods or something to make it come through. But we've got Troy Herfoss with us today, and he's in Australia. And this is a guy that it's funny because I was doing a little research because I kind of knew, but I'm old enough that I forget. So I did a little research, and this is a guy that like the kids need to know this, right? This guy won an XGames gold medal in Supermoto, and he was an AMA Supermoto Champion. And this was when Supermoto was in its prime, right? I mean, this is like the days of Supermoto before it kind of fell off a roof, but. So this guy can ride a motorcycle, right?
Yeah, and a lot of different kinds.
Right, and then we got to remember that he's a 3-time Australian Superbike Champion, and we're not talking 10 years ago. We're talking this year was his third one. So the guy's ripe, and he's coming to America. And I know that's what he's been wanting because I've read some stories where he was kind of throwing it out there that, hey, I might go to British Superbike or I might go to AMA or MotoAmerica Superbike, but he never really mentioned King of the Baggers. And Sean, does it surprise you that you're coming to America, but that's what you're doing?
Yeah, it's totally surprising. That's crazy that he would. I was like, come on, Superbike, Troy, come on.
Yeah, but it's great. Troy, tell us a little bit about how this all came together.
Yeah.
Well, first, thanks for having me, guys. We've established now that I can ride a motorbike okay, but I definitely don't know the time zones. And I don't have good internet here at the airport, but anyway, we're making it happen. I'm sorry your first international podcast has been a bit of a delay, but what a bit about me. I'm this come about just through me. I spent 10 years with Honda Superbike in Australia. Really enjoyable time. Like I loved my time there, and had a few ups and downs, and just got to a stage in my life career where I feel like I've got a few good years left in me, and I want to see what I'm capable of, and mainly step outside my comfort zone, and that was my thought process was British Superbike, American Superbike, but boy have I found a way of stepping out my comfort zone. I had a ride on the two bikes I'll be riding, the Bagger and the FTR, and I'm well and truly outside my comfort zone, but it's a lot of fun.
Did you say you rode them already?
Yeah, I snuck over and done a couple of days in Texas at a small track, Eagles Canyon.
Yes, and we know that track. Yeah, and
it was amazing facility, actually. I really enjoyed it. It was quite cold and a bit wet, but a lot of fun.
Well, your timing couldn't be any better because the King of the Baggers thing is just taken off, right? And I mean, this year you're going to get to race a bagger in front of the world at MotoGP at Coda. You're going to get to race at Daytona. In addition to, Coda twice, actually, in addition to all our other racetracks. I mean, I don't think you could have timed this any better. And I mean, timing is everything.
Yeah, and honestly, that's how my career started professionally. I had come out of junior dirt track or flat track in Australia, and I was racing a bit of supermoto at the time, wanting to go road racing, and supermoto was a cheap way to do it. I could crash the bike and pick it up, and it was not broken. And anyway, a couple of American riders come out to Australia, and I done okay, and I got my start in AMA Supermoto. That was in 2005, just as the series was sort of really ramping up, and that sort of springboarded my career really. So this isn't the first time that I've sort of snuck into a series in when it's on the up. So yeah, I'm hoping I can enjoy a few years in the States, really. Like my goal is to, well, it's funny, I have no idea where I stand. I know the level of riders in America is high, and the bikes are all good, and it's a really competitive series. But, I have no idea about these bikes and my competitors. I'm just coming in there, wanting to try something different, and I'll do my best and see how it goes. But like my goals, I do have a lot of ambition for the next few years. While I'm still kind of young and still fit and healthy, and this is a great stepping stone.
Yeah, so yesterday Troy, I texted David Anthony, and being Australian, I asked him if he knew you, and he said he knew of you, but he's one rider that he has not met. And I said, yeah, well, I get it. It's like, just because you're from Australia, it's like you don't know every Australian. He goes, well, I know all the riders, but Troy happens to be one that I haven't met yet. So he's looking forward to meeting you. But he was testing yesterday at the Podium Club in Arizona. But when you raced in the 2000s, mid 2000s to late 2000s, in Supermoto, did you live in the United States during that time period?
Yeah, I lived. I did 2 years with Husqvarna, 2 seasons with KTM, and the first year I was staying in San Diego. I was back and forth, but the 06, 7, 8 seasons I lived in America. I floated between Temecula, KTM's base, and Wisconsin. I rode for Mitch Hansen's HMC KTM team, and so I stayed in Wisconsin. Road America is actually the only track I've been on a road bike with. That was my introduction to road racing, actually, and enjoyed living out there. And I'm gonna hopefully get back out to catch up with Mitch after 16 years, and it'll be nice to see some old friends.
Now,
go ahead, Sean.
So just 2 things back on Supermoto. I got to drop a name in here too, but so you were, as Paul said, man, you were right there during the high point. I mean, obviously it was Doug Henry and, the Bostroms and Mickey Diamond and all those guys that were doing all that Supermoto during that time period. It was a huge thing. I have to ask you about one person that may have been working with you during that time period. And he's been here. He's been everywhere. Was Ron Heben on that team during that time period? You ever heard the name Ron Heben?
He wasn't on the team at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, I know Ron, and he wasn't involved with the Supermoto at the time, no. But I met him quite a few times, and great guy.
Yeah, it's just funny. I remember he talked about KTM. I think he worked with Chris Fillmore at one point there for a while too. So,
so I've got a feeling, would that have been the Superbike when they went to the Superbike program, maybe?
Yeah, it could have been during that time period. I just have one more, Paul, for this part. So there's a guy that lives near me. I live in Central Ohio, Troy. I'm sure you know Mark Burkhart, who's like from this area. He raced with Yamaha?
I really looked up to Mark. Mark was he was really the best all round Supermoto rider in the States, if you ask me. And through his prime, I sort of had to deal with that. He was just a really, really good rider, and I actually stayed with him a bit and really looked up to him, actually. Just his work process and how he went about the weekends. I enjoyed trying to catch him, and enjoyed the times I got to beat him, but it was few and far between.
So is the plan, I know you've got a family. Are they all going to come? You're not going to go back and forth, probably. It's kind of expensive and a pain in the butt, but are they planning on coming over? How's this, where are you going to be based? How's this all going to work, or do we not know yet?
Yeah, we're all in. We're jumping in, and we'll stay stateside somewhere for that main part of the season for about 3 to 4 months with the whole family. And I will fly in and fly out for probably Daytona and the Coda Road Atlanta races. But planning to be there as much as I can. And if I had my way, I'd be already living there. Right? But I've got to work out whether I'm actually competitive in this bike yet, and how I fit in with the team and the series. And if I could have the way I want it to pan out, I'll be living stateside for a few years, I hope.
I think you'll be all right. The hooligan bike probably felt pretty similar to, I guess, kind of Supermoto-ish a little bit, right?
Yeah, it did, and the team did sort of mention to me that it's an interesting bike and not probably as easy as I would think to ride. But honestly, I rolled out of pit lane on that bike, and it felt like I was at a supermoto track. It was amazing, like so much torque, low center of gravity. It stops, it turns. It was really a thrill compared to after riding a superbike with 200 plus horsepower, to get on that bike with just not huge amounts of horsepower but a good easy torque range. It was so much fun. I just kept doing lap after lap after lap on it.
Did you put your foot down?
I tried, and it's funny, the team they can fill you in on this. At the end of my first run, where the last corner there, it's a bit of a sort of a hairpin turn, and anyway, I thought I'm going to put my foot down and just back it in like a supermoto bike. Use a bit of rear brake, and the rear brake was way touchier than I thought. The rear hung out and come back around and danced around. I went straight off into the gravel and had to ride back through the gravel into pit lane. So yeah, maybe I'm a bit rusty after 16 years without supermoto.
Do you dangle your leg in road racing, Troy, like a lot of them do nowadays?
Yeah, I definitely when I'm panicking, my leg comes out. My right leg for some reason a bit, but I'm probably a little bit old school, a little bit like that way. So I'm not as you don't see my leg out every corner, but yeah, it definitely helps. I definitely do think it helps with straightening the bike out from backing the bike in, keeps a bit of weight over the rear tire. It's got its advantages, but I don't put the leg out too much. Getting too old for that. It takes a lot of energy to have the foot out like that.
So you're 3-time and defending Australian Superbike champion. Is this an either or are you going to go defend your championship next year?
I'm actually headed to Sydney Motorsport Park to do some testing with a friend of mine's team this weekend, and there is a possibility I can race. I think 6 out of the 7 rounds in Australian Superbike don't clash, and that would be ideal because I'll be home for a lot of them, and the more time on the bike the better, because I don't think I'm not sure how much testing I'll be doing with the bagger this year, so I'd like to keep my eye on a superbike, but at the moment it's just small talk and just a few test days in Australia with the superbike to help my friend out and see where it goes from there.
With how late the announcement, I mean, I read an interview with you and I think it was middle of December and you were still talking about not knowing what you were going to do, except you decided you weren't going to return to the team and back to the Australian series. Did you ever to the point where you were worried, like maybe I'm not going to be getting anything, or was it always like, oh, I'm good?
Yeah, I was worried, and when I announced, a week out from the final round of the Australian Superbike Championship that I wasn't going to continue, 99% of people thought that I'd already done a deal somewhere, and but I hadn't done a deal at all. Honestly, I was sort of at a point in my career where I thought I need to do something different, and I'm really comfortable here, so it's easy to stay here. But I was sort of of the opinion that if there wasn't anything out there for me, maybe it's time for me to move on. I don't want to stop racing. I feel like I'm riding as good as I ever have, but I really wanted to put myself out of my comfort zone. And so I made that announcement with nowhere to go. And yeah, I can tell you now, the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days after the Superbike series was over, and there was only really a bit of small talk happening, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm not needed anywhere. There's no spot for me, but I made some contact to the guys at MotoAmerica and British Superbike, and things started to happen pretty quickly, and there was some opportunity out there in British Superbike and as well, but honestly the baggers ride with Indian, it's very, very interesting, and it's out of my comfort zone, and like you said, the series is on the upward slope, and you don't know where it's going to go from here, so to be a part of it and to be part of a factory team. I mean, we went to the first test and it's factory. Like there's a really smart group of guys there that are really motivated and keen. And then you've got the rivalry between Indian and Harley.
Oh, yeah.
It's like there's so much about this ride that's motivating to me. I just can't wait to get out there. I just hope I can learn the tracks, fast enough to be competitive.
Was your teammate Tyler there or not at the test?
Yeah, it was just Tyler and I, and we had both the bikes, and I'd ridden with Tyler. He raced Supermoto
Right.
in my final years of Supermoto America, so we hadn't seen each other in a lot of years, but that was fun to catch up with him and try and learn a bit about what makes him tick. It's a fun atmosphere.
If you can figure out what makes Tyler O'Hara tick, you're better than us, Troy, because we can't figure it out. He's an interesting character. but that's cool. I had a feeling you knew Tyler.
There's a high level of intensity with Tyler, so it'll be a fun year.
But I had a feeling you knew him from those days because he's been racing a long time too. So did he have any influence on you racing on that team? Did he talk to them at all? Do you know?
So I actually done the deal maybe a month before it was announced, and I had to sign a confidentiality agreement and stuff like that. And I actually wasn't sure, who the other rider would be, and so I didn't even speak to him at all. And even I've had a lot of experience with Jared Mees as well, and obviously an Indian flat track rider, and I wanted to reach out to him as well, but I was
You're scared.
Who I could speak to. So I just I done the deal and hoped that it was going to be okay. But once I got there to make the guys, I was relieved I made the right decision. And Tyler's a good guy. He's really motivated to do well. And the feeling I get from Tyler and the team is it's about Indian motorcycles winning races, and so we work together and get the best result possible.
Yeah, it's very serious stuff. So tell us about in Australia. This is kind of a two-part question. What is the awareness of King of the Baggers in Australia, and what is the awareness of Indian motorcycle in Australia? Where do those two kind of brands sit in your country?
Okay, so the Baggers series, I mean, personally, I've had some interest in it. And a couple of years ago, Travis Wyman come out and finished a few rounds of the Australian Superbike Championship, and that was the year he battled with Tyler for the championship. So I caught up with him, and I actually remembered him from, I think the first time I met Travis was like Red Bull Rookies Cup, and I was racing as a supermoto rider for the same team. And so I had a bit of interest in the Bagger series, and obviously, like, you just see, Instagram clips show up that are getting stupid amounts of viewers, with William sliding the bike around the corners, and
right,
like what's another one? Like, guys just doing big.
Oh, Rispoli's thing on the banking.
That's right, Rispoli's. It probably takes the cake, really.
Yeah.
I hope I never have to experience that, to be honest. But so there is awareness, and we do follow and know about them. And for me, with Indian motorcycles, my main mechanic, Glenn Granger, for the last 10 years at Honda, he works for Indian motorcycles, and so for me, I know a bit about Indian motorcycles, but I don't think the presence of Indian and Harley in Australia is big. Maybe not quite as big as in the States, but they do take up a lot of the market, and that's, for me personally, I've specialised in racing superbikes and performance bikes at the highest level, and it's only the last few years we've seen baggers on track. So up until the last couple of years, my only real experience with these style of bikes, like the hooligan bikes, was through flat track. I've been a flat track fan for my whole life. So as far as the baggers go, it's only the last couple of years, but I do know quite a bit about the flat track side of things.
Well, so Troy, I got to ask you a couple. I always get hung up on these things, so I need to check. Your last name, is it pronounced Herfoss or Herfoss?
Herfoss, yeah.
Herfoss.
H-E-R, Foss. Yeah,
Foss, okay.
Exactly how it's pronounced, how it reads, really.
Yeah.
Okay, that's easy enough. And were you named after Troy Corser?
Yeah.
He's not young enough.
I wish I was. Troy. So in Australia, we had Troy Bayliss, Troy Corser, and then
Troy Bayliss, yeah.
On the national motocross side, there was Troy Doran and Troy Carroll, who were really good Australian motocross riders. And so growing up, there was big shoes to fill. Whichever direction I went, there was Troys that were really competitive. But, absolutely idolised Troy Corster and Troy Bayliss growing up, as you know, as you would expect for an Australian rider. But, yeah, big shoes to fill. But I don't think I was named after them riders, but I can't be sure.
Okay. Australia, Paul could tell you better than anybody, but man, Australia has quite a history of, well, certainly in road racing. We may not know about the flat track guys as much, but certainly there's a ton of them, starting with Paul's dad, Kel Carruthers. I mean, I'm sure that Kel's somebody you know about from the history of the racing in Australia, but road racing is a pretty big deal in your country, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and that's why for me, growing up, Australia was, Australia, America, they had a huge presence in MotoGP, 500 Grand Prix and World Superbike. So, yeah, growing up, I had big ambition because there was a lot of guys coming out of Australia and having success on the international stage. It has got a lot harder in the last 10 or so years to sort of break out of the country, but worldwide, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
The sport's a bit different to what it was in the early 90s, and that's okay with me. But, I did grow up, really looking up to the Australian road races, and so many guys had success in America. I mean, one of Matt Mladen's mechanics, Reg O'Rourke, was from my hometown. So,
Reg.
Every year he'd bring home a poster for me, and Matt would often visit home in Goulburn and just look up in awe and wonder how it's possible one rider can go so fast and win so many races.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you did a lot of motocross, I've seen, and you also had bad injuries. Was that from motocross, or was there two bad injuries in the same year or consecutive years?
I've had one bad injury. I had a small motocross injury last year, collarbone and some ribs. And
okay.
But in 2021, I had a fairly you would say life-threatening injury. I had a crash in Darwin, really weird part of the track to crash in, and made contact with the air fence, and the air fence exploded in the air and with the bike, and I went under the fence into the concrete. The crash was at 230 kilometers an hour. So I broke a lot of bones: tibia, neck of femur, humerus, ribs, toes, finger. It was really bad. So I think I've got from that one 22 screws and 4 plates, and put me out of action. I was in a wheelchair for 6 weeks, and under full-time care from my wife and her family, and a real sort of turning point in my career. Really, I wasn't a wild sort of rider at that stage, but at that stage you sort of just get out and get it done. And I reckon I use my brain a lot more these days. The way I go around the track's a bit more methodical now. But I'm past that now, and that's probably the reason that at 37 I'm making this step overseas, because I had a really good year in 2018. I was on a 2-year deal with Honda at the time, and then there was some possibility to go overseas, but I had one more year on my contract. And end of 19, I didn't get to go overseas, and then the world stopped in 2020, and COVID hit, and then the injury in 2021, and then digging myself out of the pits and getting back to fitness and health in 2022, and then that brings us to 2023. I got back to winning a championship again, and that's why at 37 years old I'm trying this. I actually wanted to try it 5 years ago, but just the way things happened, I didn't get the opportunity.
It's better with a little delay. It means more, right?
That's right, yeah. And the baggers weren't around in 2018, 19, so I may have missed that boat. So Everything happens for a reason.
That's right.
Troy, you've transcended some eras with regard to motorcycle road racing. So you came from a time where there wasn't a lot of electronics to now there's a lot. Where are you at with electronics? Do you like what it gives you? Are you happy to work with it? Is it a hindrance sometimes? Where are you at with that whole thing?
It's funny, we just spoke about the injury, because that was a turning point for me as well. I just got on a bike with a lot of electronics, and I wasn't riding it in the way it probably needed to be ridden. From the injury, I had to relearn how to ride with my body being a bit out of whack, and but it helped me learn the processes and how the electronics work and how you can make them work for you. And I can tell you, it's really enjoyable to ride a bike with good electronics. You can still slide the bike. You still got a lot of power in your hand, but it's just a bit easier to hit a lap time, lap after lap, I imagine. But for me, it's been fun because, at 30 to 31 years old, we had this big change in bikes, and it's made it interesting. There's more toys to play with and something else to sort of learn, really. So I mean, and then getting on the bagger, but it's a really raw bike. Everything's in your hand, and everything's manually controlled, and that's fun as well. So I don't really have a preference. So, I mean, this weekend I'm going to ride a Ducati V4R with Magneti Morelli electronics, and it's as close as I'll get to a MotoGP bike. And 2 weeks ago I was riding around in a bagger, and honestly, I can't even tell you which one I'm having more fun on. They're both fun in their own right. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I'm not an anti-electronics guy, but I do enjoy the bagger when you can come from almost stalling the bike to having that much torque on your right hand that you can just smoke the rear tire up. That's fun. You can't do that on a superbike, but the lap times you can achieve on a superbike these days, that's pretty thrilling as well.
Is Daytona something you're looking forward to?
Well, yeah, it is. It's going to be scary, basically. Like, there's not a lot of track time for me, and Rispoli didn't give me a lot of confidence when I the first YouTube clip I find of Daytona's, him hanging on for dear life, and the way he explained it didn't exactly fill me with confidence. But no, I think it'll be fun. Like, it's going to be thrilling. To be honest, not so much the track, just the history of the event for me is probably the most thrilling thing. Like, I grew up watching the Daytona 200 as well, so I'm not racing the 200, but I'm racing around the track. I'm going to be there for the weekend, and I'll be on the fence watching the race for sure. On Sunday, I think the Sunday's the 200.
Saturday.
Yeah,
we have Saturday.
Yeah.
We have Sunday as our makeup day if it rains or anything. So it's always Saturday.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
How do you, Troy, how do you fit on the Indian Challenger? I mean, I don't get a good sense. I was surprised when I finally met Ruben Chaus face to face. He's pretty tall. I don't know if you're really tall. You seem to be taller and thinner, but how do you fit on the bike? Are your feet touching? And I mean, obviously your seat's way up high and all that. How does it feel to be on that thing?
Well, yeah, that's funny because my first chat with Gary Gray from Indian Motorcycles, one of his first questions was, "How tall are you, Troy?" And I thought, "Oh no, this is always a bad question because I'm too tall to ride superbikes." And I said, "Oh, I'm 6 foot tall," and he said, "Oh, thank God, that's good, that's really good." So I was happy to hear that. And then when I got there, the bike is really tall. I mean, even for a 6 foot rider, it is tippy toes. So I hope that's going to be an advantage for me, and definitely tucking in for me is a lot easier on the bagger. So that's been a pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We had Jake Lewis on the podcast recently, and I mean, he's like 6'4", about the tallest guy in our paddock, and I mean, he fits pretty well on it. But then we talked to somebody like JD Beach who tried out Hayden Gillam's Harley, and it's a bit of a challenge. Of course, Patricia Fernandez last year is all of about 5 feet tall, so she couldn't even touch. They had to hold her up and catch her when she would come in sometimes. So you might be the prototype size. It sounds like.
Yeah, I hope so. And I've listened to, I think, every podcast that you guys have done that there's a possibility of talking about baggers I've listened to. So
wow,
I remember what Jake mentioned that Patricia, Patricia's main sort of worry of the weekend was getting out of the tight parts of pit lane.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, it's and I was the same. We had the bikes parked at Eagles Canyon. There was a little bit of a tight squeeze, but I noticed they parked Tyler at the back, so he had to ride through the middle, and I think that was tactical because he had a bit more experience, so he could negotiate the tight bit. Because riding out of pit lane, I mean, that bike's got so much torque. You press the button to start that bike, and if it's in gear, it's taken off.
Yeah.
So it's quite intimidating to just sit there and idle the bike, and like my first race start on the bike, I think it was I think it was almost a tenth and a half faster than my best ever 0 to 60 mile an hour, like compared to a superbike, because they just accelerate so fast. So that it's really intimidating, that first experience with the bagger. So it's it's definitely a bike I'll have to show a lot of respect for, I think.
Yeah. A couple of years ago when Josh Hayes was racing over there, did you see him, talk to him when he was involved in that, riding that FJ 1200, 1300, whatever it was, in Australia?
Yeah, my memory from Josh in Australia was he done a few rides in Australian Superbike.
Yes.
Maybe at a MotoGP support event or something.
Yes.
And I knew Josh. I knew of Josh obviously from my racing days, because he was obviously the pinnacle of the sport back then as well. He's a great guy, Josh. I mean, always so supportive. I think even back then he mentioned, if you ever want to come out to the States, let me know. And just a really, really nice guy. So hopefully I get the same reception from all the riders over here, here in the States. I mean,
you will for a while.
You'll see how it goes. Yeah. But so I have to go back to something you said. So I cannot believe you're from the same place as Reg O'Rourke. So listen, I could understand Peter Doyle. I could understand what Matt Mladen was saying. I never could understand a damn thing that Reg ever said. I mean, I don't know what his accent was, but I can understand you perfectly. What's the deal with that guy? I mean,
yeah, I don't. All I can tell you about Reg is if you're at a bar and he takes his teeth out, you've got to get out of there.
We know about that.
He's about to get real angry. So you might not be able to understand him, but if he takes the teeth out, you got to remember to get out of the way because you're in trouble. But no, I can understand Reg fine. But that was always the running joke. I think he almost spoke a different language even to the other Australian mechanics.
We know about the teeth too. That's pretty funny. I forgot about that actually. That's pretty good, Troy.
Yeah.
Okay, we know you've got a flight to catch. How much time do you have?
Well, the team owner just delivered me a coffee and a croissant, so it must be delayed a bit longer. So I think when he gives me a wave, I'll have to go. But you've got to be careful because my old team in the last 10 years used to call me Mini Mark. My dad's name's Mark, and he talks a lot. So, I might get you stuck here for.
That's great.
No one wants to listen to an Aussie guy ramble on for an hour and a half.
Everybody that does a podcast likes to have a guy on there that can talk a lot.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I've got Sean. Sean can't shut up. So
I never stop. I do want to.
And it's really hard at the moment. Now we've got everyone talking. The screens are going. I know. Between two people, so I'm getting confused every time.
Yeah, it's hard. Hey, well, so let me ask you this. So you mentioned about motocross. I've always said motocross is the absolute devil for road racers because you guys always seem to get hurt doing that stuff. But it's such a great form of training for you. Do you do moto to train with? Is that part of it for you?
Yeah, I do. I've done a lot of motocross. When I went to the States because I was a flat track guy and I needed the help in Supermoto, and then sort of found a love for it and got a lot more competitive with it. And then I had about 4 years where I didn't ride motocross up until my injury in 2021. And part of the process last year, I was just sort of a bit stale. The first two rounds last year, I was on the podium, but I could tell that I was not going to be winning anything, and I needed to change something up. So I started the motocross again, and I was riding motocross 3 days a week last year, and honestly, it's a double-edged sword. The intensity you ride at on the motocross bike and being comfortable being uncomfortable, that when you get back to the road race track, it just meant that I was rolling out of the pit lane for FP1, and I was really comfortable straight away because you're riding 3 days a week over a changing surface, and the bike's out of control as such. But then you've got the crashing aspect, and like I do credit, like for me as a rider, that the team and I done a good job. But for my riding only last year, I credit the motocross a lot, and it was a double-edged sword because the intensity I was riding on the motocross bike meant that I was falling sometimes. but I got away with it, and that I think made me a better motorbike rider. I got really lucky with the injury. We had a 8-week break after my collarbone and rib injury, so no one really seen. I didn't. You wouldn't have even known I had an injury if I didn't tell anyone. So, but yeah, there is that aspect of it, and I think it's just about weighing up the risk to reward, and that's where when you're a competitive person and you get to a track, that's the hardest thing, because there seems to be a lot of reward to beat your friends, but it's not actually that much reward, is it? It's a lot of risk just to beat your friends.
Right. Now, I've also heard that you're like a top-notch cyclist. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, over the years I've dabbled in cycling racing. I've finished top 20 at the national road championships a few times, and been on the podium in some mountain bike cross country nationals, and just love it. My wife Emily, I met in 2015. She was borderline. Well, she was basically a pro cyclist at the time, and so we just, the first few years before kids come along, we were just traveling around racing bicycles whenever we could. And probably, I took up cycling in the States with a couple of guys I raced Supermoto with. Chris Fillmore was one of them. He was doing a lot of mountain biking, and I looked up to Ben Bostrom as an athlete. He was an extreme athlete, and I sort of liked his processes, and he definitely had that addictive personality like I've got with the cycling. And it's a sport that you wouldn't think would translate from motorcycling, but there's something about it that's addictive. And once I got started on the cycling path, I just wanted to race as much as I could. And being in Australia, the series is 7 or 8 rounds a year. I had time to do it. It just made it easy to do it, and I enjoyed it. So, but now that the kids have come along, it's not as easy to get out for 4 hours on your bike. It's more a run here and there, and some gym, and more focused to the motorcycling at the moment.
So did you purposely have kids to slow the wife down?
Yeah, well, it was getting where, especially after my injury, I think my first ride on our main training loop, there's a climb of about 20 minutes. I think her fastest time is about 19.5 minutes, and I'd been out there 4 or 5 times since the injury, and I hadn't cracked under 21 minutes, and she took me out there, and luckily the climb's a little bit shallow, so you get a bit of a slipstream, and when we got to the bottom of the climb the first time, she thought she'd be able to beat me, and she's taken off, and I sat on the whole way, and then she got me. She broke me by about 5 seconds at the top, and I haven't let that down. I was only riding on 1.5 legs, but she still beat me, so she's not letting me have that one.
That's funny.
You can't be the second fastest cyclist in the family.
No.
Troy, I have to ask you a kind of a local yokel question. So I live about a half an hour east of Columbus. When you were in Supermoto, did you have that event? Did you race in that event in Columbus?
What would the event have been called?
It was.
I'll try and jog my memory.
It was Supermoto, but it was like in downtown Columbus. It was kind of like through the streets and everything. It was. I know there was obviously a dirt section too, but I thought they had something that was right down in the city at one point. Maybe it wasn't then.
Yeah, I think the only street circus I got to race was, I think, Rio and the Queen Mary in
Long Beach.
Yeah, I don't think I was there. Yeah.
Okay. I know it was around that time, but no, most of them did you have a favorite track that you liked when you did Supermoto in the US?
Yeah, I loved, we raced to Connecticut on a speedway. Nashville, Tennessee was my favorite.
Nashville.
It was on an oval track, and I hadn't at that time I think I took my first pole position there, and I was way faster than everyone, and it was probably the first event that I definitely should have won, and I crashed out of that event. But I just remember the oval was so much fun. You're wide open, 6th gear on the 450, and then you'd back into the banking, up the bank and down to the dirt section. But the Supermoto was just so much fun all around. I mean, I just wish it had have really taken off. I mean, to this day, I'm not sure I've had more fun the days about, training with Chris Fillmore around the country and just, dirt, road. There's so much versatility. But you can do anything. You can enjoy any part of the day, whether it's the dirt or the road. And then the times I've done X Games, KTM would close up the Supercross track for me and I could go and ride Supercross on my Supermoto bike. So Supermoto just opened up ways to do anything, any discipline, from flat track, road racing, motocross, Supercross. So it was really enjoyable. And all the tracks were really quirky and fun.
Which X Games did you win your gold medal?
So I actually got second at the X Games.
You didn't get a gold medal?
I broke down in the lead one year. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got an X Games silver medal.
That's all right.
I didn't want to have to correct you on that because it sounded so good, but
yeah, I should have shut up.
2008, and Mark Burkhardt actually won. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I tried to not to say anything, but yeah, Mark Burkhardt won that. So
all right.
I got a second.
Which X? Where was that X Games?
Had a lot of jumps. That was X Games Moto X World Championships at San Diego that year, and then one year I was leading X Games one year, and my bike broke. Yeah.
We'll count it.
Sore point.
All right, Sean, you got anything else?
Did you like the format of the X Games, or was it a lot of, it seemed like from what I heard, you'd sit in that lounge all the time and then you'd have your event and then you go back in that lounge for a while because there's so many events going on there that aren't related to motorcycles. But did you like being a part of that?
I think I just appreciated that we're a part of it. So the waiting around wasn't ideal, but it was fun. I mean, for me as a 18, 19, 20-year-old guy, there's a lot of guys competing, whether it's BMX, skateboard, freestyle, a lot of guys that I've grown up watching. So for me, half the fun was getting around watching that. And then being on a stage like on a stage so high, it was just, I just appreciated to be there, to be honest.
Oh, Paul, I've got one more I've got to ask Troy. So a little background here, Troy. I grew up in New York, very close to Canada. I watched a lot of Canadian TV. That's all that we got. That and one US channel. Okay. Canadian TV, they actually have a lot of Australian programming on there because I guess they're a Commonwealth or whatever. So one of my favorite shows my favorite series of movies is Mad Max, but that doesn't count. My favorite TV show when I was a kid was a show called Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. Have you ever heard of Skippy the Bush Kangaroo? Don't you? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was on at, I think 4 p.m. or 4:30 p.m. I'd get off the school bus and Skippy was coming on, and I'd always wonder why I could never find a kangaroo that could be like Skippy.
I loved that show. It was
that was a famous show in Australia.
Yeah, it was huge in Canada too, and I love the fact that the thing was kind of like Lassie but it was a kangaroo. I loved it. It was so awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. With that, we'll let him catch.
Funny, Mad Max. I've done a lot of training with a motocross rider in Australia, Stephen Gall. He was a Mr. Motocross rider, and he's in his early 60s now. But Gawley done the stunt riding for Mad Max, and at his house he's got a big R1 superbike with knobby tires, all the stuff hanging off it, the long swing arm, and the exact bike he done the stunt riding on.
That's cool.
It's pretty cool actually.
That's very cool. I love those movies so much. Yeah.
All right, Sean, we're going to let him go.
Okay.
Troy, again, thanks I'm glad we got our days worked out and all that stuff. I know it can happen because they're day
I'm glad
ahead.
we got this worked out because I was starting to probably sound like I was a bit highly strung and hard to deal with. I was out by a day. I'm trying to put you off because of a flight. I'm like, I'm actually easy going.
Yeah, I know. We can tell that. I knew you would be, so I wasn't worried. But thanks for joining us. And obviously we're stoked to have you, and we can't wait to see you in action at Daytona.
Yeah, I really can't wait to get over there, and I appreciate the warm welcome, and all the guys in your motorcycles have been great. I just I hope I can get over there and see some old Supermoto friends, maybe in the road racing paddock, and can't wait to meet everyone and see what MotoAmerica is all about.
Yeah, you'll like it. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy.
Thanks, guys. Chat to you soon.